690 Studios, it's Talk El Paso with Andrew J. Polk. Be a part of the show by calling 915-544-KTSM, 915-544-5876, or comment online on our stream at facebook.com/Talk El Paso. It's 4 p.m. Mountain Time, and that means it's time to talk El Paso with Andrew J. Polk.
Thank you all so very much for joining us here for Talk El Paso, airing live on News Radio 690 KTSM. I am your host, Andrew J. Polk. Thank you for tuning in, however you may be doing so, be it on air, online, live streaming through the free and reliable iHeartRadio app, or joining us over on the various social media pages we are up on these days, facebook.com/Talk El Paso, the Talk El Paso channel over on YouTube, Twitter at Talk El Paso, or twitch.tv, Andrew J. Polk. However you are tuning in, whatever works best for you. We mention all those places not because we expect you to go to all of that, do all those ways here. I mean, if you're into that, sure, I'm not going to stop you, but knowing where to go, what works for you, and being in the right place to be able to be part of our two core missions here: A, having live local talk radio here in the borderland, because damn it, I think we deserve it, and B, making sure that we talk about the things that affect us here, because no one else is going to have the discussions about the things that affect the people who live here, work, all those things that happen in life right here in the borderland and the larger region, our broadcast area, which, I mean, sometimes is expansive depending on how the vagaries of the weather gods and such go about there. As we have Angel Rueda over on the Facebook chiming in there, Patriot Chick over on the YouTube saying gas stoves matter. Yeah, I've seen that debate going on here. I've got one myself here, but I definitely need a better ventilation hood in my house. I've been since we removed to the new place. It's got a hood, but it just kind of recycles the air back in and not like out. And I have definitely found out the, let's just call it peculiarities of having hardwired, but also linked smoke alarm systems. Yeah. I don't want to get any further into it than that, but I mean, that's one thing going on in the region, certainly. But a few things top of mind here for today, definitely happening right smack dab in the middle of all this. Some interesting updates of a sort, closed door meetings, but some coming out of it on what might be happening now with the August 3rd Walmart shooter case, the indicted shooter in that case, about the state level trial. Of course, we've had the guilty plea and the anticipated, I believe it's February 8th hearing that'll be happening with that. Those, of course, are the federal charges. What's going on with the state level ones? There's a lot of time frame questions and, well, just logistics to get through. So we're going to be getting to that there, as we also have Eric von Holstein-Rathlow. Hujambo? That's not one I'm familiar with, but definitely waving for you over there. I get that part. Appreciate that. Again, if you want to add your 2 cents over on the social media, this is not to say we ignore the on-air audience. We know that's the silent majority out there, so to speak. I mean, we have the phone calls that we take later in the show here, but for the most part, if you're tuning in, again, hearing us, if you want to get more involved, you certainly can with the social media, if you can do so safely. No one better be out there holding the wheel between their knees while texting on their phone here. I'd be ticked enough if I was next to you, much less if you're doing it on, like, my behalf, so to speak. Oh, Eric von Holstein Rathlow clarifying that is Swahili. So, okay, I feel like I may have heard that phrase before, but someone have actually had said, like, directed it towards me, and learn something new every day. Anyway, again, so the August 3rd Walmart shooting indicted shooter case, some possibilities there. There's still a lot of question marks, but some interesting input coming from, well, the district attorney is getting there. And then, okay, so you've got a lot more border enforcement things going on, including some very interesting numbers, even just since from the start of this year, from locally based federal authorities. And then, of course, what the Texas Department of Public Safety is talking about when it comes to their efforts. I mean, basically what Operation Lone Star is doing, and particularly in our area, which had been, I mean, more than a few questions and more than a little bit of kerfuffle logistically and rhetorically speaking. Not saying it's a rhetorical question, but in the rhetoric that has been being used or had been used before there were like those disaster declarations, among other things. So those interesting situations, and still keeping the spirit of what we usually would do on Wednesdays, except we have some of those more logistical things, some upheaval on the part of our news partners there. Some of the stories that we have previously talked about on the in-depth reporting, some, I would call them updates, or at least changes to the situation whenever it comes to, well, let's just call it both demolition and vandalism happening in El Paso and Las Cruces. Still some roads shut off and shutdowns going on around, more in essentially remediation that has to happen on a situation of that former shoe factory or shoe-related industry in El Paso, and then arson, but then also funds to deal with it up in Las Cruces. So still getting in depth on some subjects, even if we don't have the much missed voice of Estefania Seifert, but the show must go on and we'll still talk about the things that are in depth from that here. Phone lines a little bit later in the show, as we usually do, par for the course whenever it comes to that. And again, comments throughout the program. So let's dive right in. El Paso Matters posting as of this afternoon their article. We have the date wrong apparently on part of it. We try to make adjustments, but sometimes there are fat-fingered moments there. So appreciate the note on that, Patriot Jake. We'll see if we can make the adjustment on the title of it, because it is absolutely the 25th. And so based on the article that has now been put forth by El Paso Matters, among others, just titled here, Walmart shooting trial could be in 2024, maybe 2025, quote, end quote, District Attorney Bill Hicks says. So, of course, we had the major announcement coming technically, and they're not even technically announcement, but the news coming out over the weekend. Let's put it that way, because that's the most accurate way I can think to put it when it comes to the, again, entire August 3rd case, what may or may not be happening with the shooter, the fact that there was not the federal death penalty charges being filed. Apparently, I mean, cause and effect can be pretty well seen there. So should have made that adjustment there, Patriot Chick. Appreciate the notes. I think we got the day right. It is Wednesday, right? It better be Wednesday. Otherwise, I am in so much trouble. Anyway, what's going on with this case here is that, okay, the federal trial, we got that status update hearing coming in early February, let's just say that. And there have been, of course, questions for the state level trial, and most of the hearings, most of the updates, things like that for the state level, it's been going on in local state courts, district courts, particularly I do believe it's in the 409th District Court. Judge Sam Medrano holding a closed door status update hearing earlier today. And usually, I mean, that's noted by El Paso Matters specifically, that this is not been the usual way that this has worked here, noting that although the public has been allowed to attend previous status hearings in this case, Medrano barred the public from Wednesday's hearing without explanation. So that's a bit unusual, but given that there are significant logistical concerns, including just how can this trial proceed, I guess maybe it's not totally out of course. I mean, maybe you want to have a very frank discussion, though why that wouldn't be held, like, say, in chambers or something like that. That's not really my question to behold, and maybe I'm going a little bit too much, watching too much Law and Order lately. In any case, what is being said, the defense attorneys in this case, again, further noted by El Paso Matters, Joe Spencer and Mark Stevens, left the hearing without comment to the group assembled to report on this. But what El Paso's new district attorney, Bill Hicks, did say is that on exactly when this will proceed, because, okay, just to further lay it out, because this does get complicated, we have, of course, this trial that has been delayed years at this point. I mean, you remember even at the time in 2019, as I mean, dust was continuing to settle, so I'm not going to say everything was flat and laid out even at that point in time, but I remember calling and saying very specifically I would have been very surprised if anything substantive happened before an actual week of it. Anyway, before actually a year of it, misspoke there. So it's before a year, which absolutely bore out, though much I wasn't anticipating courts being shut down because of pandemic restrictions. So I was more right than I would have liked to have been. In any case, the fact that this has dragged on so long and that we've had the upheaval going on within the district attorney's office, yeah, that leads to, I mean, I guess I'm not surprised that they met behind closed doors in order to do this. John Brazelton, also saying that please note that 60 plus victims got to split $15 million due to the shooting. Money talks in El Paso. I think you're referring to the one fund and the amount that came out of that. To my understanding, it was more than that, actually. There were major dispensations, of course, to victims, survivors, and their families for those that weren't, and a lot based on generosity of it, because I mean, in some cases, there were major breadwinners or complete upheavals of family. And having done some interviews with those involved in the actual administration of that at that point in time, it was we cannot make this right. Nothing can, not even necessarily the court process, besides delivering. It's not focused on healing the hurt. It's about delivering justice. But to try and make it so that mitigation can happen, I mean, there are people who are going to be having medical treatments for the remainder part of their lives, or at the very least going to need to be having access to psychological tools and evaluations. I mean, the impact, even just in the larger part of the community, has been significant. We're probably going to see parts of that forever. Just living memory, let's put it that way. So that's why we, among other things, keep talking about the updates in this case, because I find it very, very important to do so for this community. So what Bill Hicks said is that on, again, district attorney, that after this hearing, what exactly may be expected going forth. What he said, again, according to the reporting from El Paso Matters, quote, "I'm not sure, 2024, maybe 2025. I'm not sure. That's completely up to the judge, and we'd have to meet again in order to discuss that." Now, 2024 is an interesting potential suggestion because, well, I mean, the ideal would be to get going as soon as possible. But again, given the fact that this is not even in for a couple of months yet, district attorney dealing with an office that has been having significant difficulties in other ways, even overall, I'm not going to be surprised that trying to shoot for it, say, this year is even being considered in the realm of possibility at this point, because coming back into it, getting up to speed and trying to make it happen, I will say that as much as there are still questions about how the federal part will proceed, if there's been essentially charges, or the charges, of course, have now been pled guilty to, but the actual sentencing that comes along with it, if that has been agreed to as well, or whether there will be essentially a sentencing phase of the trial, that's, I think, something that is often missed, that there are often two parts to particularly high level and high profile trials like this. You have the guilt decision part of it, where you are then wondering how the jury will decide the evidence presented, having them weigh it back and forth on, okay, do we believe that the person who is accused, or persons in the circumstances that it may be, in this case, of course, it's one, are they considered guilty or not? Then they go to the sentencing phase of the trial. So that's the part that I'm curious about at this point, if there will be that portion, which, of course, some of the initial dates have already been set for 2024. Now, if for some reason, I mean, agreements being made, etc., if this will end up being an actual plea deal, or just all right, now that we got the charges, fine, we'll go along with it, thinking of the defense essentially in this case, if that is therefore just going to be like eclipsed, among other things that, of course, the district attorney Hicks has said, is that he has to be released from federal custody and into state custody in order for trials to proceed. So, I mean, if they still got the federal proceedings going on, can't even really, I guess, begin to go through the state level. But if for some reason, hypothetically speaking here, that all of the federal proceedings were to be concluded and therefore not needed to go forth in 2024, I would see that as again, completely outside look. I have no particular insight into how the district attorney, outside of whatever else has been reported, essentially, how the district attorney's office is proceeding at this point. I would say that 2024 would be a possibility. Whether it be early, I mean, I think the federal dates were set early, so I'd be surprised if it was along that, but even middle time of it, of course, those do run into some other issues, including, well, the election that would be coming along with that. Yeah, you don't often want to think about trials in terms of who is going to actually be at the helm of it, but given that this is an interim appointment that has been done of the district attorney, that is, by Governor Greg Abbott, and there just questions that come along with he'll be able to or not, who may or may not be kind of lining up to do that seat in 2024 when it next come up for election. More than a little bit has to be considered, whether or not even any of the attorneys that may be part of or returning to being recruited by this office, etc., has to be a part of this. RJ saying, yeah, I think what a lot of people are also talking about, saying, let's hope the DA Hicks gets the office handling cases, and especially the shooter, and gets him convicted and sentenced to death. This town won't settle for less, from what I hear just talking to folks. Again, I do want the process to go through as well. You're certainly entitled to your opinion on it, but I will say that anything, well, also then being put by Patriot Chick, Whiskey Tango Foxtrot, are they looking for a mistrial? That had been, I think, one of the biggest questions in the previous administration of the district attorney's office of, what the heck are you doing? What is going on? And I mean, the fact that there had to be gag orders put into place and essentially dressing down in the courtroom, I've never been anywhere near that level, though. Anytime that the judge's gaze in any courtroom you're in turns onto you, let's just call it unfavorably, is not a fun time. Nowhere near this kind of excoriation that happened for the previous district attorney. But I would say that regardless of what the actual decision is, that the possibility of a mistrial would be the worst possible income. Any idea of there actually being, for any kind of technicality, this case not being just decided flatly would be the worst way. I feel pretty confident in saying that, both in my analysis and in ways people would agree, that if this were to go to any kind of technicality not being able to be seen through to its end, would be the worst outcome there. We also have Stephen Christopher chiming in over there. Whatever time you got for, just as a side note, as we're well overdue for that first break. Sorry, we got me on a topic that I've definitely been thinking about a lot of speculation, both on our air and, again, impact to the community. Stephen Christopher working 2 jobs, but don't forget, you can also, of course, find us over on social media. The videos stay up even after we're live. I know, it's kind of like live sports, going back and watching an old episode is you know how it ended, right? Or at the very least, since you can't comment live, it just hits different. As we also have Sean Gardner. Good afternoon to you as well. So that's obviously this issue, this case, the implications that come from it, definitely seriously in the back of my head. But we got other in-depth things to talk about here, including what I will call updates, sideways maybe, to some of the investigative reporting that we would usually be talking about on Wednesdays. But as there's been some shifting around on that, TBD on how we'll actually deal with those segments going forward, working on some things on the back end. But tell you what, talk more about that, the details and the stories about, including vandalism, demolition, remediation having to happen with it. Yeah, whole lot to get into there, including funds that are available, well, for the land of enchantment in local areas anyway, but all delving into that a whole lot more, taking that first break, back after this with more Talk El Paso here on News Radio 690 KTSM. Stay tuned.
Traffic all day. News Radio 690.
No crashes on your El Paso freeways right now. They're looking pretty good. There's an injury accident, Yarborough at Pebble Hills. Take Montwood or Lee Trevino as your alternates. Slow traffic on Montana Avenue eastbound, McRae out to Zaragoza with 8-minute delays. Also 8-minute delays northbound Zaragoza between the Loop and Montana. And a reminder, a portion of El Paso Street south of Paisano Drive remains blocked off for another week. Kerry Edwards, El Paso traffic.
Winning $1,000 incites all kinds of emotions.
Are you kidding? No way.
What to do with it is up to you.
We're going to Key West, that's it. What are you, nuts? We're going to Atlantic City.
Listen for your chance to win $1,000 with inflation compensation.
Listen for your chance to win $1,000 every hour from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Enter the nationwide keyword at ktsmradio.com for your chance to win. Brought to you by Sunland Park, Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram, where buying a car is fun.
This report is sponsored by the Truth with Lisa Booth podcast.
Lisa Booth, the race for RNC chair is underway. We'll talk to constitutional law attorney Harmeet Dillon about why she is challenging incumbent Ronna McDaniel. Listen to the Truth with Lisa Booth every Monday and Thursday, but you can listen throughout the week on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hi guys, it's Mark. Are you struggling with erectile dysfunction? Did you know that a major medical breakthrough is now available and it isn't a pill? Today, Wednesday, January 25th, we're running a one-day special you won't want to miss out on. Northbrook Medical Clinic uses the most powerful form of wave therapy. This is a technology clinically shown to repair blood vessels and improve blood flow. It's backed by 60 clinical studies, including from Cambridge. If you're ready to regain that spark in the bedroom, today is your day. Call us now and you'll qualify for the assessment and ultrasound totally free. You'll also get a gift that can produce rapid and powerful results in the bedroom in minutes. You're going to love that one, guys. Trust me. And today only, we're offering 5 tune-up treatments to our patients free. This is an unprecedented offer worth hundreds of dollars, but call today and qualify totally free. Call 915-529-9000. That's 915-529-9000. Guys, put a stop to your erectile dysfunction and get your life back. Call Northbrook Medical Clinic now to qualify. This offer ends today, Wednesday, 915-529-9000.
Hey Texas! This time of year is all about coming together and enjoying time-honored holiday traditions or starting your own. This winter, make sure your fellow Texans, especially those with a serious mental health condition, know how to stay informed and protected from increased COVID-19 risks associated with serious mental illness. Getting vaccinated is pro-Texan protection against COVID-19. Visit www.vaccines.gov/search to find a vaccine provider near you.
Hello, this is Joe Cordell. Cordell & Cordell is a firm that practices family law exclusively. We focus on only one area of the law to maximize our strength and effectiveness as advocates for clients that have everything on the line: their homes, retirement, savings, and most importantly, their children. We're the partner our clients count on. If we can be of help to you, give us a call.
Schedule an appointment with one of Cordell & Cordell's Dallas-Fort Worth area attorneys. Offices in Dallas, Fort Worth, and St. Louis. CordellCordell.com.
El Paso's News Radio 690 KTSM.
Live from the KTSM AM 690 studios, it's Talk El Paso with Andrew J. Polk. To be a part of the show, follow on Facebook at facebook.com/Talk El Paso. Now here's your host, Andrew J. Polk.
Thank you all so very much for joining us here for Talk El Paso, airing live on News Radio 690 KTSM. I'm your host, Andrew J. Polk. Thank you for tuning in, however you may be doing so, be it on air, online, live streaming through the free and reliable iHeartRadio app, or joining us over on the various social media pages that we are up on these days. Again, facebook.com/Talk El Paso, more or less the main one. It's not exactly official, but if you're looking for the people that are most engaged, talking the most about Thunderdome comments for the most part here, consensus is fleeting, but at least very much having an honest discussion and wanting to get into the issues that affect us here in the borderland. I'll always take that over pretty much any alternative. So if you really wanted to talk about the things, that's a good place to go. But of course, other pages, other Facebook pages even, and then YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. Again, Twitter is more of a like DM kind of thing, or responding to it. We can't put it up on screen. It's kind of the upshot, but do keep our eye on that. If you ask questions, bring up points there, we try to be responsive to it specifically. So hey, if that works for you, more than welcome to do so. Anyway, more comments kind of particularly over on the YouTube, including RJ saying on the prosecution and the August 3rd case in general, saying, I've never seen a more pathetic handling of case of this magnitude. El Paso was on the verge of being a laughingstock over something very serious. I find it hard to disagree with you on any particular point of it there. I mean, again, this was not even just the only parts. I mean, arguably, you could say that that everything going on with the district attorney's office before this point was kind of a sideshow to that major case that continues to be reported on statewide and even nationally. I mean, it made headlines again once there was that guilty plea made. So, yeah, I definitely agree with you in shades of that way. So definitely very interested. We'll keep focusing on what is going on with the current district attorney's office. And John Browson saying in response to, I believe, Stephen Christopher saying, please continue working 2 jobs. U.S. and Texas need the extra tax revenue. I mean, maybe arguably, I mean, if it works for your family and your lifestyle, go for it. But given the fact that we got that, what's the latest tally, about $50 million left over, including the surplus in the states beyond the state budget, actually. Yeah, I mean, sure, U.S., fine, whatever, absolutely. But Texas, I don't know. We'll see what comes out of those property tax or just tax reform, tax relief, etc. in general proposals that the governor has been pushing so far. A lot of roundups happening of different bills and kind of things. We're keeping our eye on them, including, as noted by the Texas Tribune today, about election-related bills, them focusing on that today, but one more going on there, but also on the YouTube, saying that RJ saying maybe a new DA appointed by Abbott will send the circus packing in response to a comment by Patriot Chick. I will say that as much as there's a lot put on like the city and the region, this is technically a state department, a department of the state of Texas, I should say, because, of course, the reason we say the district attorney for El Paso is because they don't just cover El Paso. It's also, I believe, Hudspeth and Culberson, if I'm not mistaken, and other intimations about what should have already happened with this trial. Again, speedy is often fleeting whenever it comes to major cases like that, but wanting to make sure it progresses correctly has absolutely been in the back of my mind with all of this. But at least one other thing I want to mention here, I'll tell you what, just in brief, set it up here because I've already talk through this next segment before getting into it. A couple of things going on in our region that relate directly to some of the investigative reporting that we've had going on, particularly from our news partners at KFOX 14 in recent-ish months and even years. Of course, if you've noticed, still issues going on in and around downtown El Paso. Article from our news partners there at KFOX 14 El Paso Street remains blocked off during delayed demolition project. That fire that happened, that's a major part of the response that happened downtown, as it didn't actually start in a dumpster, is some of the updated information, but definitely spread to a dumpster later on in any case. But 324 El Paso Street area and roadways near and around that have been, of course, closed since it burned on December 12th. And the reason that is going on for so much longer, I mean, it was expected to be done a little bit before the end of the year, but apparently there's been asbestos and remediation having to go along with that. City officials saying that the material, quote, must be disposed of in accordance with state and federal regulations. Yeah, that's not the kind of stuff you want floating around too much, I don't think. So it causing issues there. But of course, over in Las Cruces, there are other fires and investigations going on, including, as has been noted earlier this week, the city of Las Cruces confirming that a fire broke out at a former charter school was indeed arson. They've got some good pictures from inside the damage there, building at the 1400 block of North Main Street up in Las Cruces. And that one more directly ties Sean Gardner saying thought everything downtown was a dumpster fire. Metaphorically and literally speaking are two different things in this case, or the latter if you're wanting to talk about the actual damage, the former if you're wanting to say your thoughts on the area. There's plenty of things going on with downtown that we often focus on and are worth talking about, but particularly in Las Cruces, given the fact that, okay, there's not been exactly as much focus on, the cause of the fire in El Paso still remains under investigation at the very least. But in Las Cruces, with that building having been put out as having been an arson, and this is not the only incidence of, let's just call it more broadly, vandalism that has, of course, happened in the region, and particularly in the land of enchantment within our broadcast area. So we're going to take that break right now. Coming out of this break, we're going to talk more about the programs that are now being put forth and how this kind of relates to some of the previous in-depth reporting we have certainly talked about. So taking that next break and closer to the phone lines, we'll announce that here shortly. But in the meantime, stay tuned. More Talk El Paso, talking more about, again, the programs and how this relates to some of the in-depth reporting, as well as some of those immigration numbers and discussions that are definitely affecting us here in the borderland after this break. More Talk El Paso here on News Radio 690 KTSM. Don't go anywhere.
El Paso's News Radio 690 KTSM.
Hello, everyone. This is Robert Olguin with your KFOX 14 News Update. An El Paso woman has been arrested on criminal charges related to her alleged wire fraud and impersonation of a federal employee. According to court documents, 53-year-old Ana Maria Hernandez portrayed herself to be a U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services employee and defrauded more than 20 victims by providing them with the false pretext that she would process their immigration applications. Investigators revealed that Hernandez had amassed more than $400,000 of unexplained wealth in the 18 months coinciding with her alleged fraudulent activity. In Las Cruces, a fire that broke out at a vacant building on Saturday is now considered arson. That vacant building used to be a charter school. On Monday, the city posted a notice condemning the building. KFOX 14 called the real estate company. The manager says they've had issues with people breaking into the property. This has been your KFOX 14 News Update. I'm Robert Olguin.
News Radio 690. Traffic all day.
From the KFOX 14 Severe Weather Center, I'm Chief Meteorologist Brad Montgomery. A front is going to be coming through this evening and the overnight. That means a colder one for tomorrow morning. Most areas getting down into the teens and 20s. Make sure you're layered up heading out Thursday morning. For your Thursday, highs likely stuck in the 40s, so keep the coat jacket handy all day long. Looks like highs back in the lower 50s by Friday, a little milder with 60s for the weekend. From the KFOX 14 Severe Weather Center, I'm Chief Meteorologist Brad Montgomery.
This report is sponsored by Texas Health and Human Services. Life can take a turn for anyone, and if it has for you, remember that there's so much for you to turn to. We all need supportive people and healthy outlets in our lives, so we don't have to face hard times alone. Visit turntosupportstx.org for the help that's right for you.
Attend the El Paso Gun Show this weekend, January 28th and 29th at the Forum Ballroom, 3800 Maddox, El Paso, Texas. See dealers selling the finest in modern guns, custom knives, ammo, scopes, rifles, shotguns, and much more. Buy, sell, and trade at the El Paso Gun Show this weekend, January 28th and 29th at the Forum Ballroom, 3800 Maddox, El Paso, Texas. Get $2 off admission. For more information, go to azgunradio.com.
Why do you buckle up when you get in your truck? Maybe you do it to get home safely to your loved ones, or because you take your job as a professional driver seriously, or because you want to follow the law to stay safe. Remember, it doesn't matter how long you've been driving, or even if it's a quick trip. Wear your seatbelt to stay safe on the road. Learn more at www.sharetheroadsafely.gov. That's www.sharetheroadsafely.gov. And remember to buckle up when you get behind the wheel. Paid for by FMCSA.
Are you tired of listening to stories that are saturated with wokeness? If you are, then you should try Red Pilled America. We tell good old-fashioned stories that align with middle America values. Listen to Red Pilled America anywhere you get podcasts. That's Red Pilled America.
This report is sponsored by Red Pilled America.
Talk El Paso is going daily. Join host Andrew J. Polk weekdays at 4 with the Borderlands' only live local talk radio show, breaking down the impact of the news and taking your calls. That's Talk El Paso, live Monday through Friday at 4, right here on News Radio 690 KTSM.
Sponsorship and advertising opportunities are also available. To find out on how you can affordably reach an affluent and highly educated demographic, please call iHeartMedia at 915-351-5473. That's 915-351-5473.
Hey, hon, what you doing with your phone?
Do flowers have best friends?
I don't know. Hey, look.
Whoa.
Some answers can only be found in nature. Discover the unsearchable. Visit discovertheforest.org to find a trail near you. Brought to you by the United States Forest Service and the Ad Council.
News Radio 690 KTSM.
Live from the KTSM AM 690 studios, it's Talk El Paso with Andrew J. Polk. To be a part of the show, call 915-544-KTSM or follow on Facebook at facebook.com/Talk El Paso. Now here's your host, Andrew J. Polk.
Thank you all so very much for joining us here for Talk El Paso, airing live on News Radio 690 KTSM. I am your host, Andrew J. Polk. Thank you for tuning in, however you may be doing so, be it on air, online, live, streaming through the free and reliable iHeartRadio app, or joining us over on the various social media pages we are up on these days, facebook.com/Talk El Paso, the Talk El Paso channel over on YouTube, Twitter at Talk El Paso, or twitch.tv, Andrew J. Polk. Those dropping those likes and reacts that we do appreciate anyway. I mean, this is a Facebook thing and only for people over there, so not to be exclusive, but if you like what we're doing and it helps with all those algorithmic things, dropping those likes and reacts, Robbie Flores, Monica Cervantes, Ida Beza Gardner, James Holmes, Flaco Jimenez, and a lot more commenting there. Of course, don't want to neglect over on the YouTube, which is different. I mean, it doesn't come in there. Patriot Check, RJ, and others chiming in there, and on the various social media channels, including Sean Gardner and Stephen Christopher, saying that he's working his 2 jobs on top of military retirement. And James Holmes saying, thank you. They will definitely find a way to waste it. Yeah, from everyone I know that receives that or, military disability or anything like that, it's appreciated, but given the, also being talked about over there on the YouTube channel, Patriot Chick talking about pedicure prices going up, and RJ maybe having a tiny bit of sympathy. Let's just put it that way. Conversations go on and often take on their own tone and tenor, so sometimes we lose track of it, particularly when we get into the phone calls. But if you want to add your 2 cents, we often then end up popping it up a little bit in order to talk further about it. So more on, of course, what we were talking about before we got to that break about what's going on with some of the local areas and the vandalism, particularly, I mean, okay, the situation in El Paso is still ongoing, but in Las Cruces, this, of course, has been, an ongoing problem, consideration, public outcry, however you want to put it there, because, and it was even mentioned there in the news break by our news partners there at KFOX 14, and so then talking about this arson at a vacant building, it hasn't even, of course, been vacant building. Some of the previous conversations, longtime listeners might recall about the investigative reporting there, including the one done by about not quite halfway through last year. So this is definitely going on for a while now. Las Cruces businesswoman asked city officials to address vandalism at stores. And so the conversation I recall that we had about that, talking about the newest shop, Junk, and I believe it's Junk and Disorderly on West Amador near Camp Hope, is seeing significant amounts of break-ins, and even within the first week of them opening, or at the very least, like locks looking like they were attempted to be broken into. And so it's gotten to the point, I mean, that's one case in point kind of thing, but it's also been announced within the last couple of weeks here, I do believe, that the city of Las Cruces is therefore looking at actually making it more possible for people to essentially seek recompense from this, among other things. I mean, they've actually announced a program in order to actually support the people having to deal with vandalism. The city of Las Cruces announcing that and saying that they really do need, Las Cruces announced, it's already out as of this weekend, Las Cruces to help small businesses repair and get reimbursed for property damages, because There's actually been $400,000 approved by Las Cruces City Council members in order to help small businesses repair current property damage or get reimbursed for past damages. From our news partners there at KFOX 14, speaking with Ruben Vasquez, owner of Zafiro's Pizzeria, it would definitely help to help small businesses around here that struggled through COVID to make to this point, and anything that was damaged in the past, this would be very beneficial at paying this back. Noted that some of this funding did come from the American Recovery Plan Act, and they are going to be able to, local businesses in the area, Las Cruces that is, apply to get $2,500 grants to repair or get reimbursed for property damages that happened on or after January 1st of 2021. And I mean, there has been, some of the other businesses that our news partners there spoke with, including Little Toad Creek Brewer, and of course, some of the other businesses we talked about there. I mean, it's been a bit of a problem. As much as dumpster fires, literal and metaphorical, have been a discussion in downtown El Paso, there was, I do recall, I want to say about halfway through last year, to maybe around about 6 months ago, that there was literally a series of dumpster fires in and around the downtown Las Cruces area. So that actually having to be addressed, the fact that there is funding available there is important. There are some deadlines that are coming up with that kind of far out. If all of the funds for, again, the ones the city of Las Cruces has put forth is not spent by February of 2024, they would consider a second round of funding, a second call out for it. And Eric von Holstein-Rathlau asking who's perpetrating all of this vandalism. There was, of course, some intimations as part of the investigative reports that we talked about it maybe being some, regional nonprofits, including the Junk and Disorderly owner that we spoke to, our news partners there, saying that kind of pinned some of the blame on the Camp Hope, the nonprofit organization that was not too far away from it, that is focused on providing housing and rehabilitation of those who have been essentially accused of crimes in other ways. But of course, there was the further investigative reporting coming from our news partners there, talking directly with Camp Hope, saying that they are trying to help end homelessness for dozens, and including housing, kind of the tiny houses, and ability to get out of it, and started in 2011 to get people off the streets. But honestly, I think it's been a decently wide-ish spread. I mean, the fact that they've had to consider this amount of, just shy of $500,000 of vandalism funding is significant enough in its own right. So there are definitely further issues, and I think pinning it on any one source would probably be a mistake. Patriot Chick also noting in our area, saying some jerks putting graffiti on our community mailboxes. I will say this: if you call, I do believe it's a 311, or if you go to the city of El Paso, there are places where you can request for vandalism or graffiti removal. Graffiti specifically, any more developing damage kind of thing, that you might be unfortunately on your own for. But I would often encourage, if you got the ability to do so, and particularly evidence to do so, file police report if you can. For that level, community mailboxes, I would say that the calling the 311 number and reporting it and requesting the graffiti cleanup is kind of like how you request pothole repair, that kind of whole system. So, I mean, that's your prerogative, and if you want to do it. But I will say, as much as the whole idea of broken windows policing is problematic in a few ways, I will say that whenever there's a permissive environment thought about, and RJ asking if it's federal, no, that's a local program, City of El Paso. I do believe that's the question you're asking there. And RJ asking, what's the formula? I think a chemical formula, if you're talking about on TV, that removes and does all kind of magical things. I mean, pick your infomercial of choice here, but also don't be mixing chemicals on your own. That's how you can accidentally make noxious gases or jet fuel, which is not a good thing to have in your face. Anyway, so 311 is the city number, I do believe. I'll double check that for you all right now, but that should be a way that you can request this kind of service. But the point I was making there is that, again, as much as the idea of everything has to be in perfect repair may be onerous, that's when it's seen as a permissive environment, that there are no consequences, or at the very least attempts to undo something. It does, I guess, change the tenor and response that people have when it's going on with that. So if there's more prevalences of graffiti, if there's more prevalences of, the eponymous broken windows, it can make it seem like, all right, well, does anyone care? The level of care and concern that comes with it, I guess a kind of a juxtaposition I would take with that, still in the downtown area, that ever since there has been the end of specifically some of the cases involved with the whole Duranguito downtown arena, any part of it, definitely has seen some community efforts going on, including like cleanup efforts, some painting of sidewalks with like colorful things and chalk and such. And even I think I saw pictures of someone like crocheting a tree, like doing the whole knitting a scarf but like around a tree, which is a thing you can do. I guess wouldn't be my pastime, but I don't judge too much on that one. But showing the level of involvement, I guess, is the important part of it, and people being involved in the community is where the real important part of it comes in. Because sure, if it seems like no one cares, then kind of maybe doesn't incentivize someone to take malicious action, but says like, no one's going to do anything about it. So the care and concern that comes with it, I hope this might be able to be a turning point for these kind of issues that both local businesses, elected officials, etc., have been able to deal with, both in Las Cruces and potentially even in our area. But there's a whole lot more to get into in that, and that's going to take us through our next break right now. Coming out of this break, let's go ahead and open up those phone lines as we usually do at this point during the program. So if you want to get on the line, that number to do so, open now, of course, is 915-544-5876, 915-544-KTSM. Back after this break with more Talk El Paso here on News Radio 690 KTSM. Stay tuned.
Traffic all day. News Radio 690.
Watch for a crash with injuries as blocking the right lane eastbound Montwood Drive at Joe Battle. On the 54 Patriot southbound approaching Montana Avenue, the right interchange ramp is blocked due to heavy traffic, heavy congestion in that area. Montana eastbound is slow with 16-minute delays between McRae Boulevard and Zaragoza. And an injury accident northbound Yarborough at Alameda Avenue. Carrie Edwards, El Paso traffic.
This report is sponsored by Texas Health and Human Services. Life can take a turn for anyone, and if it has for you, remember that there's so much for you to turn to. We all need supportive people and healthy outlets in our lives, so we don't have to face hard times alone. Visit turntosupportstx.org for the help that's right for you.
Hey, El Paso, Ivan Ochoa, General Manager from Sunland Park Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram Fiat. Thank you, El Paso and surrounding areas, for helping us be El Paso's #1 volume dealer in new Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, and Ram sales in 2022. Our goal is to ensure that everyone gets the best deals and exceptional trade-in offers, so we can be #1 again in 2023.
Trade in and trade up for less during the Start Something New sales event at Sunland Park Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, Ram, Fiat. For a limited time, get super low 2.9% APR for 72 months on new 2022 Ram trucks. Super low 1.9% APR on 2023 Jeep Grand Cherokees, and get $3,000 off MSRP. Plus, we have a huge selection of new Dodge Chargers and certified pre-owned vehicles with the best prices in town. Worried about your trade or credit? Don't sweat it. Our lenders will push to approve your credit, even if your credit is less than perfect. Trade in and trade up for less at Sunland Park Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, Ram, Fiat. Where buying a car is fun at I-10 at Sunland Park Drive or online at sunlandparkdodge.com. Estamos en tu esquina, El Paso. El Paso strong. Includes factory rebate and dealer discount plus TTNL. 2.9% APR is $15.15 per thousand finance. All select vehicles with approved credit. Offers not combined.
Hey, Texas, did you know that individuals living with serious mental illness are more susceptible to severe COVID-19? Visit covidvaccine.texas.gov for vaccination resources to help reduce the risk and keep yourself and your fellow Texans informed and protected this holiday season. Stay healthy, Texas.
I'm Martin Hoke, the inventor of Navage Nasal Care, and I love Navage. I've told you about how your nose is the body's air filter, that Navage's powered suction will help flush out allergens, viruses, mucus, and germs, and that Navage will help you breathe better. But what do other people say about Navage? Like Tara, quote, "My doctor wanted me to do saline rinses for my allergies, but I've never been able to successfully use a neti pot. Navage uses suction power, so it's foolproof. There are nights when I'll have particularly bothersome allergies. I'll bust it out, and the results are immediate. It's such a relief. It's become a lifesaver," unquote. She's one of over 100,000 online reviews praising Navage, the all-natural solution trusted by over 3 million people to help you breathe better, sleep deeper, snore less, and stay healthier without drugs. Navage is available at Walmart, CVS, Walgreens, Target, Rite Aid, and online. Navage, Navage, clean nose, healthy life.
Coming up on the Ben Ferguson podcast, Hunter Biden, while addicted to drugs, hooking up with prostitutes, was living in Daddy's house where the classified documents were being stored. So were the Chinese visiting him? I'll explain exactly who may have been in that house. Download the Ben Ferguson podcast now.
News Radio 690 KTSM El Paso.
Live from the KTSM AM 690 studios, it's Talk El Paso with Andrew J. Polk. To be a part of the show, call 915-544-KTSM or follow on Facebook at facebook.com/Talk El Paso. Now here's your host, Andrew J. Polk.
Thank you all so very much for joining us here for Talk El Paso, airing live on News Radio 690 KTSM. I am your host, Andrew J. Polk. Thank you for tuning in, however you may be doing so. A lot of ways to interact with the program, particularly at this point. We have those phone lines open now. That number to call, 915-544-5876, 544-KTSM. And I at least want to follow up on the thing I was talking about, finally found the information. Yeah, El Paso's 311. So you should be able to dial that or go to elpasotexas.gov/311 and you can come up with code enforcement violations, non-emergency stuff here. And they do specifically list graffiti, potholes, even with traffic signals, as well as other issues, including weeds and trash and stuff like that. So yeah, 311 in the line. It is available Monday through Sunday, 7 a.m. to 11 p.m., including holidays. If there are emergencies, they'll be transferred to 911. But if you got questions about other stuff like that, though, over in the comments about issues with mailboxes, I think the way Patriot Chick put it was about a community mailbox, so not the one immediately in front of your home. But yeah, anytime anyone's messing with mailboxes, etc., as much as they are were a trope of like a coming of age teen comedy, someone driving along and hitting all the mailboxes off with a baseball bat. Dumb for a variety of reasons, but often overlooked is the fact that, yeah, that's like immediately a felony because you are messing with the federal mail system. So, so it might end up being reported to the Postmaster General. But if you got questions along those lines about dealing with graffiti, wherever it may be or not, 311 is a pretty decent place to at least start. And also just some discussion about cleaning products to deal with it. I would say don't deal with it yourself if it's on your building or something like that. You certainly can, but I mean there are services available and all that you're paying for anyway. So at least start, I would say, with 311. Anyway, let's get to those phone lines now. Again, the number to call is 915-544-5876, 544-KTSM. We do have Ben on the east side here with us right now. Ben, thanks for joining us.
Hello, Andrew. In light of the news about the documents found in Biden's possession, and that some of these documents that were found were said to be about Ukraine and China, I think I need to repeat something that I said before, and that is that in 2017, Congressman Adam Schiff, who chaired the House Intelligence Committee at the time, was forced to release 57 transcripts of testimony under oath about collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russians. And in these transcripts, not one of these liars that were on news and social media sites that were promoting the Russian hoax on a daily basis said under oath that they did not have any proof of any collusion of the Trump organization with the Russians. Adam Schiff, who said on TV numerous times, the evidence of collusion was in plain sight, quote, the evidence of collusion was in plain sight. Obama's director of national intelligence, James Clapper, and now a paid CNN contributor, Obama administration Deputy National Security Advisor Ben Rhodes, Samantha Power, former ambassador to the United Nations, Susan Rice, former National Security Advisor under Obama, and also Andrew McCabe, the former Deputy Director of the FBI. He was fired for lying, and also now a CNN contributor. Obama's top officials publicly lied about Trump and the Russians over 2 years, but when questioned under oath, they knew nothing at all. And in Dan Bongino's book, Follow the Money, you've got to read that. He says people that were targeting Trump for Russian election interference were actually working together and making money off of their connections with foreign countries. and are continuing to do so now. The same way that Biden has probably been acting as a foreign agent of Ukraine and China and getting paid for this through his son, Hunter. When Donald Trump got elected, I ask you, did Obama and Biden and other officials know that the grift was going to be exposed, so they had to take Trump out? Hence the Russian hoax and impeachment efforts to get him out of office.
I mean, that's a not uncomplicated question. What I will say about that is this, at least a little bit more recently, and getting a little bit farther afield here, but I'll try to address the point. Of course, some of the news that's coming out today-ish, in the recent week, I'll call it this way, about major new transfers of not just funding, but specific weaponry happening to Ukraine. I mean, there's been the M1 Abrams, as well as I think it's the Leopard 2 tanks coming from Germany as well. What's also been going on in the background of that is that there has been some shakeups within the administration of Ukraine, actually, in Zelensky's government, at least as far as I'm aware, the tally about 5 high-ish or high and below level officials being done there, because as much as there is what is that? I picked up the Time magazine that had Zelensky named Person of the Year on that, which is also notable to mention that I think it was a couple decades ago that they also had Putin as Person of the Year. Interesting track record they got there. But the point I'm trying to get at here is that the shakeups happening there, I mean, considering that they're literally in wartime here, you don't usually end up seeing that much of it. But and as much as there's been a lot of focus going on within Ukraine and on particularly their, the struggle and the way the international focus has been on it, is that there has been a lot of corruption within Ukraine on its own here. I mean, if you want to put in the focus of a post-Soviet republic, and really you want to go back to 2014 and the, Maidan Square and the essentially revolution that happened at that point in time, when anytime you have a head of state fleeing their own country, I would tell you that's more along the lines to an idea of revolution than not. About which way it points here was very much closely aligned with the Kremlin and with Russia and the kleptocracy that has, of course, become. And so the continuing focus on this is about making sure, okay, we're going to give you stuff. You also have to make sure we're going to be doing it right and not just going to be anytime there's a blank check involved, you're going to have someone who sees the dollar signs in their eyes and thinking about, okay, how can I use this to enrich myself personally? There are legitimate questions certainly to be asked about there and focused on it. Yeah. So I don't know if I totally go along the lines of the idea that this was some kind of, anytime we start getting into 4D chess kind of terminology and talk of it, honestly, that unless there's like significant proof and like details of it, I'm not saying it's impossible, but I really would want to see the details in those cases of if they're saying, well, we're proving this as kind of a counter op here. Yeah, I'm not totally convinced of that, but of there being questions still definitely remaining. And there's been involvements since even before 2014, but really it kind of ramped up in the amount of like weapons and other support that was happening at lower levels than now, but were significant in their own right. I'll just say it's complicated, but there are still questions to be asked and really follow-ups and like audits and things to be done, because just giving things out and saying, I'm sure you use it right here is not usually a good way of doing either business or running a country.
You're absolutely right. You've done your homework, which is really good. It is a matter that I think they've made this so complicated and everything that most people can't follow the money. And they're trying to cover it up now because of the documents. And also, because of all this, are we now on the path to thermonuclear war because these people have been grifting off our government for that long?
That's certainly, the saber rattling has certainly been significant there. But tell you what, we got to take that next break to hit the top of the hour here. So we'll talk more about this. I'll kind of address that point in question, but we'll also take more calls after this. So stay tuned. More Talk El Paso after this break. Top of the hour news here on News Radio 690 KTSM. Don't go anywhere.
Traffic all day. News Radio 690.
Police and medical on the scene of a crash eastbound Montwood Drive at Joe Battle Boulevard.
News
on the 54 Patriot southbound at Montana Avenue. The right interchange ramp is blocked due to heavy congestion. Injury accident northbound Yarborough at Alameda, and northbound Mesa Street is slow. 7-minute delays from Wyoming to North Desert Boulevard. Kerry Edwards, El Paso traffic.
NBC News Radio, I'm Brian Shook. The suspect in the Half Moon Bay mass shooting is having his arraignment postponed until next month. A California judge approved a defense attorney's request to move Wednesday's scheduled hearing to February 16th. The 66-year-old suspect is accused of killing 7 workers earlier this week at 2 farm sites in the town south of San Francisco. Former President Donald Trump's Facebook and Instagram are being reinstated. Meta, the owner of both social media sites, announced Wednesday that Trump's accounts will be made active again in the coming weeks. The company promised to put safeguards in place to prevent repeat offenses. Trump was suspended from both accounts in 2021 after calling January 6th rioters great patriots. The U.S. will send tanks to Ukraine to aid in its war against Russia.
We're also giving Ukraine the parts and equipment necessary to effectively sustain these tanks on the battlefield.
President Biden announced the U.S. will provide Kyiv 31 M1 Abrams tanks, which are among the most powerful in the world. A group of Republicans want to reinstate service members fired for refusing the COVID vaccine. Texas Senator Ted Cruz is also pushing to award those soldiers back pay because he claims they were wrongfully terminated. Global economic growth is projected to slow this year. Lisa Taylor has more.
A United Nations report released Wednesday estimates growth will slow to 1.9% this year, a decrease from an estimated 3% in 2022. That's due to Russia's war in Ukraine, continued fallout from the COVID-19 pandemic, and high inflation. The report says it's one of the lowest growth rates in recent decades. I'm Lisa Taylor.
CNN reports actor Jeremy Renner was trying to stop his snowplow from hitting his nephew when he was pulled under and crushed by the vehicle on New Year's Day. You're listening to the latest from NBC News Radio. A Virginia teacher who was shot by a 6-year-old student is suing the school where the event unfolded. Abby Zwerner was seriously hurt after the child opened fire with a handgun in what police called a targeted attack at Rich Neck Elementary School in Newport News. NBC News reports Zwerner texted a loved one before the January 6th attack, complaining the child had her fearing for her life and school officials were failing to act. At least 12 people are under arrest following several early morning drug trafficking raids in both New York and New Jersey. Liz Warner reports.
NYPD, DHS, and Secret Service officials executing multiple search warrants just after 6 a.m. this morning, targeting a wide-ranging methamphetamine distribution ring. They raided several locations in Hamilton Heights, Washington Heights, and in New Milford, New Jersey, among them a barber shop and a juice bar. Officers could be seen leaving locales with boxes. NYPD reports many of the suspects arrested have ties to gangs. SDNY will be handling the case.
A bill in the Texas legislature that would prevent citizens from China, North Korea, Russia, and Iran from buying land in the Lone Star State is being denounced as racist and xenophobic.
Human beings who have no connection to a foreign government do not represent and should not suffer for those governments.
That's State Representative Steve Wu. His family fled to Texas, and buying a home was part of their path to citizenship. Wu says the bill stigmatizes immigrants,
especially people like my family who fled here, who sought refuge here.
The author of the bill is worried about rival governments creeping in near military bases. Metallica is bringing their new album to the big screen. The band will premiere 72 seasons at movie theaters across the globe on April 13th, giving fans the chance to experience the long-awaited record the day before its release. Brian Shook, NBC News Radio.
Now your chance to win $1,000. Just enter this nationwide keyword on our website. Cash. That's cash. Enter it now.
This report is sponsored by Red Pilled America.
Are you tired of listening to stories that are saturated with wokeness? If you are, then you should try Red Pilled America. We tell good old-fashioned stories that align with middle America values. Listen to Red Pilled America anywhere you get podcasts. That's Red Pilled America.
I'm at risk of having an unplanned pregnancy,
Of becoming a parent too soon.
or making a decision I'll regret later. But if I do face an unplanned pregnancy, a modern adoption plan will put me in control.
I'll choose my baby's parents. And if I want to be in her life,
I'll get the support I need to make life better for me.
better for my baby.
Modern adoption plans empower women and create more happy lives. Hear stories of empowerment at modernadoptionplans.org. As a Walgreens pharmacist, I talk with people all the time about little tips and tricks for filling their Medicare prescriptions, like taking advantage of Walgreens 90-day refills to save them a trip, or using Refill by Scan, which is super easy and right on your phone. And for anybody worried about prescription costs, I say, hey, we got you, with low-cost copays on many medications.
Let's talk about making things easier. Walgreens is here. Fill your way and save at walgreens.com/Medicare. See pharmacists for restrictions and exclusions.
Hello, this is Joe Cordell. Cordell & Cordell is a firm that practices family law exclusively. We focus on only one area of the law to maximize our strength and effectiveness as advocates for clients that have everything on the line: their homes, retirement, savings, and most importantly, their children. We're the partner our clients count on. If we can be of help to you, give us a call.
Schedule an appointment with one of Cordell & Cordell's Dallas-Fort Worth area attorneys. Offices in Dallas, Fort Worth, and St. Louis. CordellCordell.com.
And now for today's Roblox winter weather alert. iHeartland on Roblox has been walloped by a winter snowstorm. It is a winter wonderland. You can now ice skate at State Farm Park. In State Farm Neighborhood, you can compete in snowball fights, grab a hot cocoa and cookies, and more. There's also special events from your favorite artists and podcasters all month, along with scavenger hunts, exclusive content, and unique items. So enjoy the festive winter weather at iHeartland on Roblox. Head to iHeartRadio.com/iHeartland today.
El Paso's News Radio 690 KTSM.
Live from the KTSM AM 690 studios, it's Talk El Paso with Andrew J. Polk. To be a part of the show, call 915-544-KTSM or follow on Facebook at facebook.com/Talk El Paso. Now here's your host, Andrew J. Polk.
Thank you all so very much for joining us here for Talk El Paso, airing live on News Radio 690 KTSM. I'm your host, Andrew J. Polk. Thank you for tuning in, however you may be doing so, be it on air, online, live streaming through the free and reliable iHeartRadio app, or joining us over on the various social media pages we are up on these days, facebook.com/Talk El Paso, the Talk El Paso channel over on YouTube, Twitter at Talk El Paso, or twitch.tv, Andrew J. Polk. If you want to add your 2 cents, put it on the social media channels, you can. But, of course, we have those phone lines open now as well, though full up at the moment here. Yeah, that is the way that it is. But keep the number handy if you want to add your 2 cents, jump in that way. 915-544-5876, 915-544-KTSM. There's a lot to get into here today, but as much as it is not the usual focus during the week here, I do think it's important and something that's been kind of irking me, the whole concept beyond any of the actual parts of the war in Ukraine and what's going on there, and the fact that, to my understanding, if you actually say war in Ukraine in Russia right now, you can still be sentenced to about 15 years in jail because it's not a war, it's a special military operation. The propaganda around this abounds, and of course, I find myself mostly opposed to the Russian side of it, but to say that it doesn't exist on the other side of it just means you're not paying attention to the propaganda. Some of those commenting on that here, including RJ saying that we are headed to World War III if we don't stop helping Ukraine, rather, with tanks, drones, and all the rest. We're already at war with the 101st Airborne, I think you're referring to there in Romania along the border. Biden needs a wag the dog war. Listen, I mean, of course, there are implications that come along that way here, but I don't see the alternative of just suing for peace and being done with it as a potential solution either, because then we're just in a 21st century version of appeasement, and Czechoslovakia is happening in 1939, 1938, and of Neville Chamberlaining this up here. So what I'll say here is on the concept of, particularly the way Ben put it at the end of last hour, the concept of war. You all may be familiar with the concept of the doomsday clock, and it's from the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientist, famously announcing that after essentially the advent of the nuclear age, 1947, and what they announced as of this year, within actually the last couple of days here, January 24th, is that they announced that the time that they have onto it, so they have it as the whole how many minutes to midnight, how many, if everything goes exactly wrong, minutes, or in this case seconds away, is the world from doomsday. Essentially, as stated, the way I think of it anyway, as a commentary on, okay, if enough people screw things up, if enough people just say, damn, the torpedoes full speed ahead, are we away from nuclear annihilation? And so they put it at there. It's moved back and forth over the years. The furthest way it can be is 15 minutes, so not exactly a long way, considering that there are still like ICBMs and things like that. But as of now, they've actually set it at 90 seconds to midnight, the most pessimistic view that they have put forth. So to say that, well, I don't think Putin will do it, I think that the saber rattling is both well, feature and offensive in its own right, and a threat is only as good as long as you can keep making it. I will say that. So that's just one thing that does play in my mind in answer to the full questions that came up end of last hour here. But let's get back to those calls on the line. Of course, the number to call, again, keep it handy, 915-544-5876, 544-KTSM. We do have Raul in the Northeast on the line with us here right now. Raul, thanks for joining us.
Hey, Andrew. Well, I'd like to remind Ben that Donald Trump admitted that his son-in-law, and his campaign chairman met with Putin's people at Trump Tower. So there you go. I mean, Trump reeks of Putin. It's so clear. That relationship is so weird. Now, you stole some of my thunder. I was going to talk about the doomsday clock being moved up to 90 seconds, the closest ever to global catastrophe, and they're saying it's due to worries over Russians' veiled threats of nuclear warfare. Putin is one bad dude, and Trump was his bromance buddy. Isn't that something, huh? Now, since the creation of that doomsday clock by Albert Einstein and the scientists who helped develop the first atomic weapons at the Manhattan Project, they've added additional catastrophic threats in the setting of the clock. And that includes anthropogenic global climate change and disasters, nuclear proliferation, and global pandemics. Now, commenting on the clock's resetting, Mary Robinson, who's a former president of Ireland and former United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, she said the threats are even more acute and the failures of leadership even more damning. We live in a world of interlocking crises, each illustrating the unwillingness of leaders to act in the true long-term interests of the people. I was in the 7th grade when the Cuban Missile Crisis took place, and I clearly remember the air raid exercises we had in El Paso due to Fort Bliss and Biggs Field being located here in town. I really thought the end of the world was coming. It was very, very scary, let me tell you. And this, along with the Vietnam War, when then it wasn't from the threat from the outside that was the threat to us. Now it was the threat from our own leaders who were sending off my generation to a stupid war, an unjust war that killed 54,000 American troops and who knows how many millions of innocent Vietnamese. It's easy to lose your faith in government. I lost my faith in government way back then, as opposed to all these Trumpers who just coming around to them. They just heard about the deep state. It's like they never heard about the military-industrial complex, except that they were all for funding it all the time. So this, along with the Vietnam War and the great responsibility that my father told me that raising kids represented, persuaded me that I didn't want to have any kids. And you never know about kids. You can have great kids, and they could get shot at school or at Walmart or while partying. They're not safe anywhere, anytime. Or they could just be killed by a drunk driver. You never know. Or you could have a kid that's born with all kinds of congenital birth defects. You never know. You never know how it's going to come out. Or you could have a kid, and even though you're good parents, because I knew good parents, and the kids turn bad, and they ruin the parents' lives. You never know. That's the way. It's the lottery of life. And so, again, Dan, Trump reeks of Putin. Wake up.
Again, interesting analysis there. I will say that, there's a degree of just kind of your overall statement there about all the things that go wrong. I got to say that life comes with risk. There is nothing you do, and literally doing nothing still comes with risk. Sedentary disease, among other things. You think staying in bed all day is going to prevent you from having anything possibly happen to you? To live is to risk it all is the, not exactly philosophy I live by, but I find it a persuasive phrase because you're all in. There is no, I'll just see how this works out. Your life, this is it. So to say that, well, I'm afraid of everything that could potentially happen, I got to say, if that's truly the way you end up living your life here, that doesn't seem healthy to me because, sure, there are a million ways things could go wrong here, not to try to feed the psychosis here, but there's literally the idea that there could be essentially blasts of neutrinos or specifically things coming from celestial events. Let's just put it that way, that could on the face of the earth that is pointed towards it, wipe out all of that. Solar flares, mass coronal emissions. There's a million things that could literally end us almost in the blink of an eye, including, of course, the idea of nuclear war. But to say that means that therefore you should live in fear and cower is not the way I find it useful to live life, because there is so much more to have and enjoy. And I just got to say, if that's, I kind of feel sorry for you if that's the way you end up living it, because there's so much more out there. And even with these issues, with the doomsday clock is where it's at. I don't know if it still applies anymore given the whole Ukraine war, but we do live in one of the most peaceful eras of human history. Of sure, we know more about all of the awful things happening in the world all the time because of the way news is. I go back to the example of the mild coup attempt against Erdogan in Turkey a few years back, was in more TV news at that point in time. And the fact that we're getting live reports, video coming straight out of that, that's the kind of thing that even in like the 90s, we heard about in like the weeks that came after it. So, I mean, and going back to the Vietnam War, the way that footage came out of that is that it had to be filmed on actual film reels, then shipped back to the U.S. and then put on the evening news. So the fact of the matter is that it took so long for it to come through. I mean, we've seen just completely change in the data, and it can be overwhelming if not taken with the grain of salt. I mean, there's a whole bunch of phrases that exist online, like go outside, touch grass. As much as I am terminally online myself, I find it important to keep it in perspective and to look around you at what we do have and what's going on. So again, if you're entitled to your mentality and part of it, but I got to say, keeping in perspective is important here. One comment coming up about the idea of a mutually assured destruction. Yeah, I guess I mean, that's been a phrase that's been around, and actually going back to what you talked about, in the Cold War era, Cuban Missile Crisis. I mean, Biggs Army Airfield wasn't always just a place that they would use to have like different state National Guards, large cargo planes come and refuel at, or have actual shipping out of troops through. Been to more of those send-offs and arrivals than I can count, really. But it used to have B-36s stationed there as part of, I don't know if it was exactly the Strategic Air Command, but essentially along the lines of the Strategic Air Command at that point in time. The B-36, this strange airplane, I got to say, what is it, a six turning, four burning? It was a combination propeller and a jet aircraft. Weird thing, look it up if you ever get the chance. And that's one of the ones that actually crashed into the Franklin Mountains here, among others. But they used to be a part of it, and there was one day around about that time that the way it was described to me, all of them got up and left. So we have definitely lived in serious different circumstances here, but the entire idea of mutually assured destruction, kind of along the lines of phrases that have been brought up more recently about peaceful coexistence, of essentially, you do your thing, we'll do ours, and as long as we don't have any interactions, we'll be fine here. We'll have our own spheres of influence. I'm not sure that those are viable in the modern age, or even the idea of mutually assured destruction, because honestly, I gotta say, even though it has not been, I think the Soviet Union was around for longer than it has been away, at least in the modern sense anyway. The idea of, well, I've got a gun, I mean, it's a standoff is what it comes down to. I've got enough guns pointed at you that if you fire one gun at me, I'll obliterate you. I'm not going to call that comforting international relations or abilities there, as being brought up, the idea of mutually assured destruction as something to rely on, because what also mutually assured destruction relies on is competent and, well, non-crazy leadership, of which I'm not saying that Putin is a stupid person. I'm saying that to call him stable and totally with like the interest of humanity in mind would not correct. I would say it that way. Still stand by my statement. I wouldn't trust him as far as I can throw him, and I'm sure I'd never even laid a finger on him. Anyway, thanks for the point in the call. I do appreciate it, and the concept and the ideas we're talking about here certainly important to discuss. And I mean, yeah, the fact that, well, okay, the way I think about it even nowadays is that starting with Fort Bliss, and then you get into McGregor Range, White Sands Missile Range, and then Holloman Air Force Base is one of the largest contiguous military reservations within the continental United States, if not the entirety of the United States. So to say that that doesn't affect us here would be also a mistake, even if it's not exactly something we can really effectuate any changes to. Anyway, let's take another call here real quick before we get to that next break. We do have Frankie and Messia on the line with us here right now. Frankie, thanks for joining us.
Put this into the cubby hole of all good grief call. Now, what's been happening over the last week is these horrible circumstances with these mass shooting stuff, okay? Most recently. And you can keep going back and it's terrible, this is horrible stuff, right? Now, let me just say something. What I've been hearing so many people not necessarily on your program, but on the national news or other websites, Facebook. But there are people say, "What's the matter with our leadership, the Congress, Senate, President, everybody else out there?" Wait a minute. Why are you beating up? When I'm not saying you, I'm talking universal you. Why are you beating up on Congress when the responsibility rests with the people who elected these? Not a guy, let's say, from your guy in Texas, Chip Roy. He sounds like some kind of packaged potato chip at Circle K, for crying out loud. What a goofy name.
Sure.
Anyway, he's out there, and the majority of his people are all gun nuts. So what's he expected to do, ladies and gentlemen? He's not going to vote for any kind of gun control stuff, no matter how minuscule it is. So I don't get this, why everybody's oh my goodness, this is so terrible stuff, when the people that you elect are representing you, again, not you, the universal you,
sure,
representing you and their thought process. So get off of it. That's what I want to say, my opening comment.
Understand about the kind of the way you're putting it there about that, the idea of, wait for Congress to do something. I mean, there has been moments when it has been possible, maybe, I don't know, but the fact of willingness to even go through it, given, I mean, some of the high profile things are, the fact that it hasn't happened yet is beyond mildly surprising here. So we'll see what this moment is. I mean, it's been on our news updates about the potential for the renewal of the assault weapons ban, given the current makeup of Congress. I'm not going to hold my breath on that one, but I guess that more just pushes it to 2024 and the outcome of those elections than anything else, as opposed to removing it from the table entirely. But again, that's kind of what I get into when I talk about the fact that everyone hates Congress, statistically speaking, and by the opinion polls, but everyone loves their congressperson. Again, statistically speaking, at the very least, in aggregate, how many people end up, just kind of passing through. The fact that we've got so many long-serving congressional representation and Senate as well, don't get me wrong, they're definitely involved in this, but unless there's like reason for a scandal, upheaval, or just a lot of activity, El Paso's frankly actually an outlier in that way of when Sylvester Reyes was unseated in the primary by then future congressperson Robert Francis Beto O'Rourke. The fact that there wasn't like a major scandal or a whole lot of energy or someone like moving in with just like an inordinate amount of funding made that very weird. So El Paso has been an outlier in that way, but for the most part, again, not talking about anyone specifically in our audience or anywhere else, people tend not to, unless again significant reason, be willing to get rid of their congressperson.
Well, again, 100% right. And everything you say, there's so many angles relative to it. But let me just say this in a nutshell, right? The way the United States is set up is self-government by the population. And if you don't like what's happening, then it's the population or the voters that change it. And until such time, you're going to continue on with this murderous rampage and all this other stupid nonsense. And that's all I want to say.
Fair enough here. Well, thanks for the point in the call. Do appreciate it.
Okay, Andrew, take care.
You too as well there. I will say that the idea, I mean, citizen involvement in elections and processes is critical. I mean, to keep referring to our area here, would we hit 6% for these or even less than that? I've got kind of depressed looking at it, so I've fallen off on remembering that. But in the city council runoff elections was not great. So anyone calling for saying, there's other things going on, like just get people out. Get organized with it, because griping about it, particularly locally here, certainly isn't going to change anything. And yes, I realize I'm a radio host, but hey, talking about things, at least getting the conversation started, I find more better way to do it than not here. Anyway, point is that getting people involved and actually activating the process, I will say, if you want to talk about those parts of it, getting into like gerrymandering, the idea of the elected choosing who elect them is a little more than a little bit screwy in my mind. But just in our area, getting people involved, understanding how the decisions they make in the ballot box then affects these very large issues. Step one, frankly. I mean, it doesn't end there, certainly, but if you're not willing to at least start with that, I don't think anyone is serious about actually effectuating these things. But let's go ahead and take that next break right now. We got more callers on the line, and of course, we'll be taking more of those phone calls. So if you want to get on the line, remember that number to call is 915-544-5876, 915-544-KTSM. Back after this break with more Talk El Paso here on News Radio 690 KTSM. Stay tuned.
Traffic all day. News Radio 690.
Joe Battle southbound at Montwood. An earlier wreck has now closed all southbound lanes on Joe Battle Boulevard at Montwood Drive. George Dieter southbound at Rojas, an accident reported. An injury accident downtown with police medical on the scene. Oregon, south of Paisano at 3rd Avenue. Slow traffic on Montana eastbound from McRae to Zaragoza. 13-minute delays there. Carrie Edwards, El Paso traffic.
Winning $1,000 incites all kinds of emotions.
Are you kidding? No way.
What to do with it is up to you.
We're going to Key West. That's it. What are you nuts? We're going to Atlantic City.
Listen for your chance to win $1,000 with inflation compensation.
Listen for your chance to win $1,000 every hour from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Enter the nationwide keyword at ktsmradio.com for your chance to win. Brought to you by Sunland Park, Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram, where buying a car is fun.
This report is sponsored by the Ben Ferguson Podcast.
Coming up on the Ben Ferguson Podcast, Hunter Biden, while addicted to drugs, hooking up with prostitutes, was living in Daddy's house where the classified documents were being stored. So were the Chinese visiting him? I'll explain exactly who may have been in that house. Download the Ben Ferguson Podcast now.
Hey, Texas, there are approximately 950,000 individuals in Texas living with a serious mental illness, which is an individual risk factor for severe COVID-19. If you or someone you know is living with a serious mental health condition, such as schizophrenia, major depressive disorder, or bipolar disorder, make sure they know where to go this holiday season to stay safe and healthy. Visit covidvaccine.texas.gov to find resources and location information for vaccine providers near you. Stay healthy, Texas.
Attend the El Paso Gun Show this weekend, January 28th and 29th at the Forum Ballroom, 3800 Maddox, El Paso, Texas. See dealers selling the finest in modern guns, custom knives, ammo, scopes, rifles, shotguns, and much more. Buy, sell, and trade at the El Paso Gun Show this weekend, January 28th and 29th at the Forum Ballroom, 3800 Maddox, El Paso, Texas. Get $2 off admission. For more information, go to azgunradio.com.
Texting enrolls you into recurring automated text messages. Consent not required to purchase. Message and data rates may apply.
Hey, Dan, how you doing? Haven't seen you around the gym for a while.
Yeah, I've really fallen off. Since I turned 40, I just don't get the results I used to get.
Could be lower testosterone.
Lower T?
Yeah, I went through it a while back. Once you hit 40, your body has less free testosterone. I got Nugenix Total T, and it's made a huge difference for me.
I've seen that ad on TV. Is it for real?
Oh, yeah. The patented key ingredient is something called Testofen, which helps boost free and total testosterone levels to help you trim up and stay lean.
And it's made a difference for you?
Man, I feel like I'm in my 20s again, at work, in the gym, and in the bedroom.
Are they still giving out complimentary bottles for people to try it for themselves?
Yeah, you just need to send them a text.
Text HUNK to 42424 right now for your complimentary bottle of Nugenix Total T, the #1 selling testosterone booster at GNC. Plus, text now and we'll include a bottle of Nugenix Thermo, our most powerful fat incinerator ever, to help you get back into shape fast. Absolutely free. Text HUNK to 42424. That's HUNK to 42424.
News Radio 690 KTSM.
Live from the KTSM AM 690 studios, it's Talk El Paso with Andrew J. Polk. To be a part of the show, call 915-544-KTSM or follow on Facebook at facebook.com/Talk El Paso. Now here's your host, Andrew J. Polk.
Thank you all so very much for joining us here for Talk El Paso, airing live on News Radio 690 KTSM. I am your host, Andrew J. Polk. Thank you for tuning in, however you may be doing so. A lot of ways to interact with the show, particularly at this point during the program, if you got a little bit of patience with you. We do have the phone line open. If full up, that number, of course, 915-544-5876, 544-KTSM. We also have the comments coming in over on social media. Those dropping those likes and reacts, we appreciate. Matt Olson, Robbie Flores, Monica Cervantes, Ida Beza Gardner, James Holmes, Flaco Jimenez, more chiming in, particularly over also on the YouTube, which it doesn't show up that way for whatever reason. Anyway, RJ, Patriot Chicken, more over there, I do believe, and discussion about, among other things, what alcohol to use. Listen, if you're using this as a drinking game, I can take no absolutely no responsibility for what that ends up being. But if you're just here to talk about the things affecting us in the borderland more, then welcome to be along and as a part of it there as well. Let's get to at least another call before we hit that next break already, as we're just kind of all over the clock here today. We do have Dave on the east side here with us right now. Dave, thanks for joining us.
Hi, good evening. Thanks for having me. Just a brief comment on the gun control thing.
Mm-hmm.
Every time we have one of these, I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, hear you just fine there. What's on your mind?
Every time we have one of these unfortunate mass shootings, or what's called a mass shooting, there's an outcry for gun control. I'd just like to point out that many of these occur in some of the cities that have the most strict gun control in the nation, as was the case this past weekend. Secondly, those who continue to cry out for gun control are the very same ones, or some of the very same ones, who are proponents for relaxing the criminal penalties for using firearms in the commission of a crime. And thirdly, they never talk about agency, i.e. the responsibility of the shooter. A firearm is an inanimate object and requires a person who intends to create harm to cause these heinous acts. And it's time that we focus on policies and not on the object that's used, the tool that's used. It's time that we focus on the persons, the perpetrators. That's all I have. Thank you.
Yeah, sure thing. Thanks for the point in the call. Do appreciate it. All right, I think we lost Dave there. But let me just say this, that, again, focusing on policy is definitely something that is more often than not the focus we have around here. I mean, yeah, we get into a lot of stuff in the progression of the show, but I will say that's an important one. And let me just put it this way. If there was a policy that I had any real confidence, faith, assurance in, would be able to solve this issue that would involve even me giving up whatever I possess in those ways, I would be willing to at least take a look at it, and depending on how it actually works out, if I thought it would actually have a chance of doing it, support it. The fact of the matter is that there has not been one that has been put forth that does not seem like it would actually have that end effect of dealing with this situation, being more than a little bit punitive as well. I mean, we've had callers and commenters to the effect of here, well, I want to deal with the, quote unquote, gun nuts of the people who are, oh yeah, they're the problem here. Listen, if it was the people that were having like large private collections that were the problem here, that we would have been beyond decimated as a country overall. Frankly, I'm not worried about the guys who own 5, 10, 15, 20, 80, 100 guns. I'm worried about the guy that only owns one and he bought it yesterday. Let's just put it that way. So that's why some of the policies that I have discussed and been talking about kind of go along those lines. But also the idea of, well, if we just get rid of all of them, we're starting to absolutely get into that whole magic wand territory that I talk about with some of my dreams to have changed, say, constitutional amendments, that kind of stuff. Because sure, end goal, maybe that would work, but the devil is always in the details. And how do you actually get there? How do you achieve that goal? Is no policy I've seen put forth reasonably achieves that without essentially just saying that, oh, people who weren't committing crimes, the biggest burden falls on you, and it may or may not actually have an effect on those that were already committing the crime. So certainly the discussion I'm willing to have here, and as it keeps coming up, well, we'll keep having it. I will say that doing the policy and the looking at of it here, the whole immediately aftermath, saying, oh, we can't talk about it immediately aftermath, actually talking about it overall, regardless of what is going on, situation, responses, knee-jerk reactions, etc., is the way I would say that actually getting done, that discussion, just kind of not seem to be how it happens that often here. Let's take that next quick break. Coming back, more calls on the line, so stay tuned. More Talk El Paso after that break. Phone number one more time, 915-544-5876, 544-KTSM. Back after this break with more Talk El Paso here on News Radio 690 KTSM. Don't go anywhere.
El Paso's News Radio 690 KTSM. Hello, everyone. This is Robert Olguin with your KFOX 14 News Update. An El Paso woman has been arrested on criminal charges related to her alleged wire fraud and impersonation of a federal employee. According to court documents, 53-year-old Ana Maria Hernandez portrayed herself to be a U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services employee and defrauded more than 20 victims by providing them with the false pretext that she would process their immigration applications. Investigators revealed that Hernandez had amassed more than $400,000 of unexplained wealth in the 18 months coinciding with her alleged fraudulent activity. In Las Cruces, a fire that broke out at a vacant building on Saturday is now considered arson. That vacant building used to be a charter school. On Monday, the city posted a notice condemning the building. KFOX 14 called the real estate company. The manager says they've had issues with people breaking into the property. This has been your KFOX 14 News Update. I'm Robert Olguin.
News Radio 690. Traffic all day.
Southbound lane still closed on Joe Battle Boulevard. Southbound at Montwood Drive, the right turn only lane has cleared. That is open. Stop and go traffic global reach with half-hour delays from the Spur down to Montana Avenue. A stalled vehicle is blocking the left lane on Gateway North at Fred Wilson. 54 Patriot southbound at Montana as the right interchange lane blocked there due to traffic congestion. Carrie Edwards, El Paso traffic.
From the KFOX 14 Severe Weather Center, I'm Chief Meteorologist Brad Montgomery. A front is going to be coming through this evening and the overnight. That means a colder one for tomorrow morning. Most areas getting down into the teens and 20s. Make sure you're layered up heading out Thursday morning. For your Thursday, highs likely stuck in the 40s, so keep the coat jacket handy all day long. Looks like highs back in the lower 50s by Friday. A little milder with 60s for the weekend. From the KFOX 14 Severe Weather Center, I'm Chief Meteorologist Brad Montgomery.
This report is sponsored by Staples Stores. Staples Print and Marketing is committed to quality and printing perfect every time. Now at Staples, get $10 off your document printing and marketing materials order of $50 or more. Offer ends 2/25. See staples.com/store/printbig for details. Try Staples and see the difference.
Why do you buckle up when you get in your truck? Maybe you do it to get home safely to your loved ones, or because you take your job as a professional driver seriously, or because you want to follow the law to stay safe. Remember, it doesn't matter how long you've been driving, or even if it's a quick trip. Wear your seatbelt to stay safe on the road. Learn more at www.sharetheroadsafely.gov. That's www.sharetheroadsafely.gov. And remember to buckle up when you get behind the wheel. Paid for by FMCSA.
As a Walgreens pharmacist, I talk with people all the time about little tips and tricks for filling their Medicare prescriptions, like taking advantage of Walgreens 90-day refills to save them a trip, or using Refill by Scan, which is super easy and right on your phone. And for anybody worried about prescription costs, I say, hey, we got you, with low-cost copays on many medications.
Let's talk about making things easier. Walgreens is here. Fill your way and save at walgreens.com/Medicare. See pharmacists for restrictions and exclusions.
Lisa Booth, the race for RNC chair is underway. We'll talk to constitutional law attorney Harmeet Dillon about why she is challenging incumbent Ronna McDaniel. Listen to The Truth with Lisa Booth every Monday and Thursday, but you can listen throughout the week on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This report is sponsored by The Truth with Lisa Booth podcast.
To protect his home and family from disaster, Steve used courage, wisdom, and his camera phone.
That should do it.
Way to go, Steve! By simply taking digital pictures of his family's important documents, Steve can always have them stored safely online, no matter when disaster strikes. Learn other simple ways to protect your home and family before a natural disaster at ready.gov. That's ready.gov. A message from FEMA and the Ad Council.
News Radio 690 KTSM El Paso.
Live from the KTSM AM 690 studios, it's Talk El Paso with Andrew J. Polk. To be a part of the show, call 915-544-KTSM or follow on Facebook at facebook.com/Talk El Paso. Now here's your host, Andrew J. Polk.
Thank you all so very much for joining us here for Talk El Paso, airing live on News Radio 690 KTSM. I am your host, Andrew J. Polk. Thank you for tuning in, however you may be doing so, be it on air, online, live streaming through the iHeartRadio app, or joining us over on the various social media pages we are up on these days. Facebook.com/Talk El Paso, the Talk El Paso channel over on YouTube, Twitter at Talk El Paso, or Twitch.tv, Andrew J. Polk. Covering a lot of ground here today, but still trying to talk about the things that affect us here in the borderland, because no one else is going to have the discussion like we do. People who live here see those effects, etc., whether it be there's just so many things that get talked about us that just end up being not the way it actually is or the way people here feel about it. But let's get further into it here. Get back on those phone lines. A lot of comments coming in over on the social media, including some interesting conversations going on about money, different drinks of choice here, and of course gun ownership. Kind of on the previous call there, Eric von Holstein Rathlow saying the average gun owner owns 5 guns. A gun enthusiast might have 25. A collector could have hundreds. A psycho has 3 or less. Again, I'm just kind of stand by the idea of the person who had one that they bought yesterday is my most concern. But I mean, there were plenty of people in this region, particularly after events, just in general and plural. And I mean, the pandemic, all of that, they were like, oh man, I need to figure something out for myself. So may have gone out and bought one. I would say that the person who only owns one, but leaves it in a safe and doesn't touch on it is maybe not a psycho, but further is someone that is possibly a danger to themselves, actually, because if you don't actually know what you're doing with any mechanical platform, be it a gun, be it a car, be it a tractor, be it an airplane, be it a forklift certified out there, definitely need to be. Same kind of logic applies, actually. If you don't know what you're doing with it, understand, have some training with it. I would want you to do that, as I always state here. And as a comment that came up that earlier this week, actually, there was the idea of more teachers being armed, and there was some, at least in the comments anyway, and on emails I received pushback on that, saying I'm not sure of anyone who's received the training in order to be able to make life or death decisions like that in the classroom. So a lot to get into there, certainly. But let's go back to that phone line right now. We do have Barbara on the west side with us right now. Barbara, thanks for joining us.
Hey, Andrew. Thank you for taking my call.
Hmm?
I wanted to make a comment, a couple of comments today. Earlier in the week on Monday, I believe it was, the Commissioner's Court had an agenda item on Planned Parenthood. And they wanted to pass a resolution to show that they were standing in solidarity with Planned Parenthood. Well, they voted before even hearing public comment. And I signed a petition. I was one of 700 people who signed a petition opposing a resolution standing in solidarity with Planned Parenthood. If they want to do things like that, those are things that you do on your personal time off. You don't bring a petition like that or a resolution to the city on a social issue, a divisive issue, to divide the community even more. And I'm going to be sarcastic here. I guess they haven't listened to their leader, Pelosi. Shame them. If they had listened to her, they would know that she says that it's all about our children, our children, our children. You have to be able to take a punch, and you have to be able to throw a punch for the children, our children. So shame on the Commissioner's Court for not even allowing the children to be born, but rather to be aborted. Planned Parenthood has been proven to sell aborted children's organs for profit. That's who our county commissioners stood up for on Monday. They all need to be voted out. That's my opinion.
So just to make sure we're talking about it clearly here, they're talking about the county of El Paso's government, right?
Yes,
Okay.
County Commission.
Yeah,
Yes,
so
Commissioner's
again,
Court.
Commissioner's Court is notably different in, well, a couple of ways, including specifically that they are partisan electors there. So as much as, I mean, you have your personal feelings about it and certainly entitled to it, fact of the matter is that they do often end up, going into those kind of decisions. There are other agenda items that they talk about, putting forth the idea of resolutions in support of different things, but these are elected, D and R's by the name there, as opposed to, I mean, there may be suppositions along those lines, but no official recognition of party affiliation whenever it comes to city council. So I will say that's what you've talked about there. The ability to respond to it is very much how it's also supposed to work, because wanting to make sure that government reflects your values or what you want to be seeing being done is an incredibly important part of this process.
But you know what, Andrew? They don't reflect the values of El Paso. They reflect their own personal values. They're there to represent the county of El Paso, not just the Democratic Party, not just what the Democrats believe. There are more than just Democrats in El Paso. And I would venture to say there are more people who are pro-life in El Paso than who favor abortion. At the meetings that I've been to, whether it's the city or the county, overwhelmingly pro-life individuals show up, whether it's either phone call, online, or in person. overwhelmingly, we always oppose abortion. But that's a social issue that, in my view, does not move our city forward as far as infrastructure, a budget, anything. It's just a stand that some of us oppose to, and our voices have to be respected too. So if you're going to bring an issue up in the county or the city, make it an issue that everybody in El Paso will benefit in some way or another. And this doesn't do that. So can I get on to my next topic?
Sure. Yeah, briefly if you can.
Okay. I was going to respond to Raul.
Mhm.
He needs to come up to date on the Trump-Russia collusion. There are two independent studies by two independent groups, professors. They both concluded independently of each other that Russia did not influence the elections, that Russia did not prefer one party over the other, that only 1% of those on Twitter who saw the Russian propaganda, only 1% of them saw it. And they had already made up their mind who they were going to vote for. So they concluded Russia had nothing to do with President Trump's win. And then regarding the military complex that he talks, military-industrial complex that he talks about, who coined the phrase? Eisenhower, Reagan? Somebody started with the industrial military complex.
I think I know Eisenhower addressed it. I'm not sure if he came up with the phrase, but he's the one that is, not exactly his farewell speech, basically warned of essentially influence of the military industrial complex, the idea of that there being the ability to create weapons of war, therefore creates the impetus in order to go to war, in order to use the weapons, and so on and so forth. Very simplistic definition there, but that's the kind of general idea, at least the way I think of it.
Right. Well, Raul makes it seem that President Trump was this warmonger, that he, did all this stuff with the industrial military complex when he was the one who kept us out of wars. What he did do is he replenished our military. He saw how depleted and worn the airplanes were. Apparently, they were repairing them with parts from old planes that no longer flew. And in order to show strength, you have to have equipment in your military to show that you are prepared. That's what President Trump did, but he did not do it so that we could go to war. So I just say Raul has to come up to date. And in that caller that just called, responding to Frankie, he's correct. But one other criteria or item that we need to look at is a mental health system. Because in a lot of these shootings, the law enforcement dropped the ball because they had already been notified about possible mental illness or mental problems of the shooters. So it's a complex issue. It's not just the gun. It's not just the shooter, a sane shooter. It's a lot of factors going into shootings. So those are my opinions. I have another one, but it's going to be a little bit longer. It's on Ukraine, and I'll just say that for tomorrow.
Fair enough. Yeah, I mean, we got more we'll get into here. We keep doing this 4 to 6 p.m. on purpose, but I'll particularly on that last part here, I will say the extremes can often be, they're rhetorical devices and often put forth as, this is what will happen, but they can be useful in order to help define your values because, frankly, either extreme when it comes to the gun debate of either get rid of all of them or, I've expressed my problems on that, but take it on the flip side, the idea of, just, distribute guns freely on the street, just hand them out here. Sure, there's been circumstances, Ukraine comes to mind, where that has more or less been done, but I think a lot of people would find themselves even opposed to that idea of it, of just handing them out, no idea who they're giving to, what it is. The idea of background checks, of at least knowing your customer, even in the idea of private sales, is important to a lot of people. So I think there is discussion to be had there, but whenever you start getting to the beyond the idea of rationality and into emotionality, or can't we just do this? Why can't it just be dealt with already? It starts getting beyond, any level of useful discussion. I'll just put it that way.
Yes. And one more point. The idea that Jared Kushner and others met with the Russians, that was a setup, just the way they set up Michael Flynn. Raul, please tell the story. They were both set up meetings. That's it.
All right.
I want to make sure I get all these things in there.
Fair enough here. Well, thanks for the point in the call. Do appreciate it.
Thank you, Andrew.
Sure thing.
Have a great one.
You too as well. I think we have time for one more call on the line here. Got another caller there. We do have Stephen on the east side with us right now. We lost Nate. Stephen, thanks for joining us.
Hey, Andrew. I just wanted to bring up something that's going on in California, and hopefully we can learn some lessons over here in El Paso, in our region, there has been a history of scientific knowledge where people have done investigations to find out that, there are long-term droughts in the American West.
Oh, sure.
That can occur. They can occur over hundreds of years. And, when we get a drought in the West, it can be 6 years, 7, 8, a certain number of years, which seems really terrible. But historically, they've done these studies, paleo studies, that show that there were droughts that last for a couple hundred years. And so there's also a known phenomenon, which is these atmospheric rivers, which will periodically bring a whole lot of rain. And so this is something that's been known for a long time. It's not anything new. And yet the people in charge don't tend to do anything about it. So the population over the last 50 years of California has doubled. And they have done no new reservoir projects over the last 50 years in California. And so I just got one sentence from the AP I want to read.
Mm-hmm.
It says, people have talked about building the site's reservoirs since the 1950s, but the cost plus shifting political priorities stopped it from happening. So you double the population. The western part of the United States is prone to droughts. You know that you periodically have these atmospheric rivers that bring a lot of precipitation, and they do nothing to prepare for it. And then, of course, they blame climate change. That's the kind of idiocy that we're dealing with our politicians and their thought processes. So I think we need to do something to prepare for the future, rather than expect that driving electric cars is going to stop droughts and floods and different things from happening.
I mean, yeah, any one solution to this is not going to be. I mean, if it was simple, it would have been done already. If it made money, it would have been done already. But let me just say this. That's why the point I keep coming back to is that what we actually do about it to deal with a shifting climate, particularly in our region, is the more interesting question for me, and the one that I think is more inhabitable at the local level. I mean, as I've put it before, our landscape is literally littered with examples of what has happened as climate has shifted in our region, whether it be these mega droughts, generational droughts, as you're kind of referring to there. I mean, a couple of sites, including the Gila cliff dwellings, the Mesa Verde, the Anasazi, as they had to get out of it there. I mean, there's even intimations within history, hasn't been much evidence, but I like the theory of it, that they ended up becoming the Aztecs as they were then forced south from it. So the fact of the matter is that changes in climate and the way things have changed have literally shaped not even just the landscape, but the way people inhabit in our area. So knowing what to do about that and how to respond to it, because, okay, I mean, there's the debate that continues on, and I'm not as interested in that part of it, but dealing with it, if you're going to be having more, chaotic things going on, more energy into a system means that things will either happen faster, more extremely, etc. We've even seen in our area when we've had those, increasing, 100-year storms. And if we are not prepared for it in terms of the way we landscape things, the way we deal with, say, arroyos, or if you're talking about California, there's also the reservoirs, and the fact that in the winter they have to empty the reservoirs, which, I mean, if you're having flooding, makes a level of sense, but if you're not having flooding, then you've just depleted what you have for the rest of the year. There has to be more responsive policy to these things. And so getting hung up on what you are or aren't allowed to have in like your personal life is not nearly as persuasive, or I think as important as what are we going to structure ourselves as a society to deal with these things. Because fact of the matter is, we are looking at more extreme weather happening off and on. Yeah, there's the whole, winters are worse, but that's also a facet of the idea of putting more energy into the system. You're going to see more disruptions, the polar vortexes we have. Point is that we need to be able to be responsive with it. So if we're just getting hung up on the logistics, the specifics, what car you're allowed to drive, what meat you're allowed to eat, what allowed to have in your house, it's not anywhere near as important in my mind as just being ready to deal with it.
So yeah, what China is doing right now is they're building all kinds of infrastructure for cheap energy. So they're doing everything. They're building coal-fired power plants. They're doing solar projects. They're doing wind. They're doing nuclear. They're doing all kinds of projects to build up their infrastructure to have cheap energy. Because if you have a smart government, then, and I'm not saying they're good, but they're smart, you provide inexpensive energy, because every other industry runs on energy. And so if you have readily available and reliable energy, your country is going to do a whole lot better. And so if we don't do something similar, then we're going to probably have some problems.
I got to say, I would love to see more idea of nuclear energy development. We did have at the end of last year or early this year, I forget the exact date, the first self-sustaining possible fusion reaction, which would be, if it could be, particularly dealing with some of the, NIMBY problems that come from nuclear power, not in my backyard kind of things, because sure, everyone likes the idea of having cheap, abundant electricity. No one wants to have the thing that generates it in that manner anywhere near them. So implications. So, I mean, I think fusion is still probably years, if not decades, away from being able to be a constant and reliable source. But the fact that they were able to have that reaction is, frankly, that would be one of the things that's, if we don't blow ourselves up, will be one of the things that is talked about in centuries to come as a major stepping stone of human development. But in the short term, I think that the idea of redeveloping it, the idea of, like to put it even more internationally, what Germany was looking at, getting rid of it, and the fact that they had to stay the end of that is significant in its own right, because having access to it, cheap available energy has been one of the cornerstones of the 20th and therefore 21st centuries in this country and the developed world and overall. And if you're not going to make sure that that is still available, you have got some serious holes in your plan.
Yeah, well, the couple $1 trillion that the Biden administration recently spent to try to lower our carbon footprint was completely wiped out by China's increase in coal emissions just this year alone. So I would say good luck with that.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, there's a lot of possibilities here, whether or not there's the political will or realistic ability to have that happen at any point in time. This is one of those reasons that I hate the idea of short-term political expediency being the view, at least nationally, that everything is looked through, as opposed to what is the direction we actually need to go and how can we achieve it. I'm not going to hold my breath on that becoming it, but I will somehow remain hopeful that that is what we'll come around to. We'll see.
And my final point is, since Ben brought it up and some other people, if you want to read up a little bit more on what Barbara just spoke about how the Russians didn't really influence the 2016 election very much. Even the Washington Post has an article about it, and so you can just pull up the Washington Post about Russian trolls on Twitter had almost no influence on the election. That was something that they blew up. And Charles McGonigal, who was one of the people in the Russian collusion probe, he was a counterintelligence guy who was running that thing. He just got charged because he was actually colluding with Russia himself. Of course, accuse the other side of what you are guilty of. That's the tactic.
Yeah, too okay, you too kind of thing here. But all right, well, we'll have to take that next break now. So thanks for the point in the call. Do appreciate it.
Take care.
All right, and actually with that, I think we are going to go ahead and just end the show there for today. We are out of time here. Usually come back for the quick segment, but that's been that kind of clock on the way we've been dealing with it today. So that'll do it for us for today. I appreciate everyone that has tuned in, called in, commented. Again, more in-depth we'll be getting into in the future days and weeks, including some of the aftermath of those visits, but more in the what will come next. And not even talking about the immigration policy, but border overall, BOTA, Bridge of the Americas, a couple of things and some agreements. But until then, until next time, stay safe out there. Look twice for motorcycles when out on the road, and have a great evening, y'all. We'll see you tomorrow.
Traffic all day. News Radio 690.
Southbound lanes on Joe Battle at Mountain Drive still closed due to an earlier crash. The right turn lane is the only lane that's open there. Lower Valley, Border Highway eastbound at the Zaragoza exit. That exit's blocked due to heavy congestion. 54 Patriot southbound in Montana. Right interchange ramp is blocked due to heavy traffic. And Gateway North at Fred Wilson, that stalled vehicle has been moved off to the left shoulder. Kerry Edwards, El Paso traffic.
This report is sponsored by the Ben Ferguson Podcast.
Coming up on the Ben Ferguson Podcast, Hunter Biden, while addicted to drugs, hooking up with prostitutes, was living in Daddy's house where the classified documents are being stored. So were the Chinese visiting him? I'll explain exactly who may have been in that house. Download the Ben Ferguson Podcast now.
Hey, Texas. There are approximately 950,000 individuals in Texas living with a serious mental illness, which is an individual risk factor for severe COVID-19. If you or someone you know is living with a serious mental health condition, such as schizophrenia, major depressive disorder, or bipolar disorder, make sure they know where to go this holiday season to stay safe and healthy. Visit covidvaccine.texas.gov to find resources and location information for vaccine providers near you. Stay healthy, Texas.
Empowering customers this spring, El Paso Electric presents Smart Meter Technology. Coming soon to your home or business in 2023. Smart meters will transform the way you use energy. Get ready to take control of your energy bill. Get ready for state-of-the-art smart. Get ready at epelectric.com/smart meters. That's epelectric.com/smart meters.
Portions of the following program were pre-recorded.
This is a special alert to all Americans who own a vehicle with less than 200,000 miles with an auto warranty about to expire or with no warranty coverage at all. Due to a decline in the economy, CarShield is announcing a low-cost month-to-month vehicle protection plan that is now available to the public to save any driver out-of-pocket expenses on future auto repairs. Call now to find out how you can pay almost nothing for covered auto repairs. Yes, you heard that correctly. Pay almost nothing for covered auto repairs. An open phone line has been established for all drivers to call for a free quick quote. Call 800-838-4715 now. Drivers who are covered will not have to pay for covered repairs again. This protection plan is at an all-time low. Additionally, drivers who activate this vehicle protection today will also receive free roadside assistance, free towing, and car rental options at no additional cost. Call us for your free quick quote today. 800-838-4715. That's 800-838-4715. What do you have to lose? Call 800-838-4715.